on a Tuesday. Normally they're on Monday. So what's the meeting tonight?
It was this afternoon.
What?
The special meeting was before this one.
Oh, for some reason, I don't know. There was a meeting tonight.
Good afternoon and welcome to the September 10th, 2019 Public Works Committee meeting. Now is the time for roll call and determination of quorum.
Evans? Armstrong? Here. Roberts? Here. Stroman? Here. Modrick? Here. A quorum is present.
Thank you very much. Now for the adoption of the agenda.
Move to adopt.
And we have a motion by Councilwoman Modrick and a second by Councilwoman Armstrong. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Now it's time for general public comment. I will open that up. I have no general public comment forms. If anybody in the audience has anything they'd like to say. So I will close that. And we will go to consent items. Items 1 through 16, and I will open public comment on that. And I have nothing here on that. This isn't for 16, I don't believe. Ted didn't put it in there, but it's 18. Correct, Ted?
What's that?
Item 18 for the sewer?
Yes.
All right. So we have no public comment on items 1 through 16, so I will close that. And I will look for a motion, or I will look to see if anybody on the council or on the committee has anything 1 through 16 to pull. Any staff members? You want to pull 16?
Please.
So we'll pull item 16. So I'll look for a motion on 1 through 15.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion to approve items 1 through 15 on the consent items, and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Item 16. Murphy Ranch Estates and Murphy Subdivision acknowledge the tabling of Resolution 2019-067, a request by Davis Engineering Incorporated for Murphy Brothers Partnership, LLC, to consider an application for a vacation of right-of-way for right-of-way adjacent to lots 1 and 2 of Murphy Subdivision and Tract F of the northwest quarter of Section 14, T1N, R8E, BHM, Pennington County, South Dakota, more generally described as being located south of the current terminus of Knuckle Duster Road. And Lisa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'll motion the acknowledgement of tabling Resolution 2019-067. If I could keep the floor.
Absolutely.
We rarely table, so I think it's good to make a statement on what the tabling is. If I could, just to define. May I ask Mr. Tech?
You may.
Thank you. Mr. Tech, could you just define that? Or, yeah, Mr. Tech. The tabling purpose? Mr. Young, I thought so.
Yeah, so this item was tabled because the action for the city to vacate the right-of-way is not appropriate because it's not in our jurisdiction. So the item has been forwarded to the county, or recommended that the applicants seek the vacation of right-of-way through the county.
Thank you very much for that definition. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman Modrick. No one else in the queue. We have a motion. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Now on to non-consent items 17 and 18. I will open public comment, and the first speaker will be Mr. Ted Wolk. If you'd give us your name and your address before you speak, please.
It's Ted Wolk, 215 St. Andrew. I recently suffered some severe sewer damage in my previous home on 1003 Racine Street. What I'd like to do today is provide some input, share some thoughts with you related to this sewer cleanup compensation program that you're going to be visiting on, and provide some information before we make a final decision. I guess new resolution, I kind of looked at that. I'm not quite exactly sure how that is going to impact me or other people. In my particular case, I had cleanup costs of about $3,200, material costs of $7,000. I put in about $11,000. I got an insurance claim of $5,000 from my insurance company, left me with about $5,800. My question is, how does this new resolution, number one, impact me? Because one of the things that reads in there is if you have an insurance refund, then you get nothing back from the sewer. So I'm not exactly sure how that works, Joel, according to the new resolution that you're putting out here. Has anybody read the new resolution? Can anybody explain?
When we get to the motion, we will actually discuss that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Moving on, I guess most people who receive the damages had to go into debt or take another financial liability on that they didn't need to bring their homes up to date. And like many of you that are probably making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, many of the people that suffered the damages today through the sewer cleanup issue are putting, they're not making the kind of money that most of us are making. So therefore, it's pretty hard for them to absorb some kind of a debt like this of $5,000 or $10,000 when they're making $30,000 or $35,000 a year. If you're making more money than that, you're making $50,000, $70,000, $80,000, you can absorb that. But that's going to take the food off people's table when they got to absorb that kind of liability. And then, I guess, I'd like to address the city's attorney language when it comes to the city not being negligent. And I think this is information that's pertinent to this whole issue. On our city attorney memo 9/5/19, the city attorneys say the average cost could be around $10,000 to $15,000 each to compensate people for property damages. He also assumes claims and future claims of several $100,000 and $500,000. That's a lot of money. And that's what you're asking us to absorb because of the city sewer problem. However, all these numbers are based on conjecture. That is why I asked the city to come up with a number related to the number of claims that we've submitted so far. In fact, council members and people that are voting on this should be wanting what these numbers are if we're going to say, hey, we're not going to pay for any property damage for people. Decisions should be based on facts, not conjecture or opinions. Although I did see in the city memo that if council or the committee decides to move forward with this, then there would be more research done on this. But I would think you would want a number before you say, no, we're not going to pay you. Bear with me here. Another thing is, we talk about getting insurance. Well, property owners, homeowners can get insurance, but the maximum that you can get is $5,000 as a general rule. Allstate, I called around, Allstate, State Farm, maximum they offer is $5,000. If you have a rental policy, when you're renting somewhere, or you're an investor and own investor-owned property, you can't even get sewer damage insurance. So people that have investments and investment property, they're 100% out, no recourse. And then I guess it states that only 0.2% suffer a loss. So does that mean that we, the 0.2%, are irrelevant and should be allowed to suffer financial pain at the will of the city and the other 99.8%? And finally addresses the fact that the city is probably not liable for using the negligent defense issue. Well, I've done a little homework here. Again, most states allow a plaintiff to cover damages from a defendant so long as his or her own fault is at or below 50%, and damage awards are reduced accordingly. This is known as comparative negligence. The other negligent law is contributory negligence. In that case, you know, people wouldn't have a chance to recover any damages. But under the laws of South Dakota, plaintiff can recover damages as long as he or she or her fault was slight. A defendant's fault must be gross or great to liable for a partner's injuries. So long as the plaintiff is only slightly at fault, he or she can receive damages reduced in accordance. And there's 5 elements that are related to this. And I'll get to my point here in just a minute, okay? Number 1 is duty. The outcome of some negligent cases depend on whether the defendant owed a duty to the plaintiff. Such a duty arises when the law recognizes the relationship between the defendant and the client. So the city owes the homeowners and taxpayers a duty to protect them. Second element is breach of duty. Okay, did the city breach their duty by not protecting the homeowners from this kind of damage? Then there's cause and effect. In other words, would homeowners have suffered such financial pain and property loss but to the action of the city sewer system? Then we have proximate cause and damages. The proximate cause is probably the proximate cause is probably the only issue at hand here, and I'm not going to read all that at this point. The only point I'm bringing these points up is there a duty to you guys to take care of us, taxpayers? Or are you going to throw us to the wolves, the 0.2%, and let us suffer at the will of the city and the other 99.8%? If we need to set up a special fund to start paying people for sewer damages, and based on, you know, the graph that we got from the one meeting that we had, this shows the number of sewer backups starting in 2015, 16. So we got a problem. We got a problem. So do we go ahead? Sure, we're going to have to do some repairs on the drainage and the sewer systems and so on. But we got a problem with these people here that are sucking it up and having to take on financial pain because of the city's sewer problem. So I want to bring those points up because you're going to have to look into your conscience here to decide whether or not those of us that suffer this financial pain are going to continue to suffer that. I'd like to see the committee establish the council set up a new committee to investigate a way to help homeowners with a sewer compensation program. If we need to start providing a surcharge of 50 cents a piece on people's water bills and sewer bills, then maybe we got to do that based on if these claims are going to continue to come in. So I ask that you consider this information in your decision-making process today. I know we're going to vote on that one resolution. Again, you know, hopefully we can clear that up, how that's going to work, you know, in the meeting here. But I think there has to be something that needs to be looked at, or a special meeting to be held to look at how we can compensate people for, you know, some of their property damages. Even if we just come up with something that provides compensation for the materials, or come up with some, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can put this together. You can put together a program where you got an insurance deductible, you know, once that's paid, then anything above that, you pay so much for the materials or something. I mean, it doesn't have to kill the city, but any kind of help would be a very positive gesture to those of us that are sitting out here suffering some financial pain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolk. And on the same item, Mr. James Bialotta.
How you doing, folks?
Would you state your name and your address?
James Bialotta, Rapid City, South Dakota.
Thank you.
I want to talk to you about this issue because there's a huge failing with the wastewater division. Not just in the sewer lines, which are famously rupturing all over town now. Now you're flooding downtown businesses with sewer and regular water. This has happened to me 5 years out of the last 16. Most of those years were in drought, when wastewater division is claiming the entire damage from this year is due to flooding. Well, if that's the case, why did it happen to me 2 or 3 times during the drought, record drought? Not only that, there's been a claim process way before I bought a house in Rapid City, which was in 2003. Not once during any of those times where I called the city and said, hey, my sewer is coming up from my floor drains, it's overflowing from my toilet, did anybody offer me a claim form. They came out, they fixed the pipe or flushed the pipe out from blockages and left. This is the first year I was even told there was a claim process. And then I had chased people down to fill it out. In fact, once I figured out how to do it, I helped others do it because they were getting the runaround as well. And to make matters worse, people in the wastewater department told your insurance carrier, we're not liable. They told them there was no blockages. The mayor, Steve Allender, admitted during the last hearing that there were blockages. They said there was no broken pipes. And during the meeting, they said, these pipes are broken and leaking groundwater. They said there's no negligence. I've informed them for more than 15 years of sewer backups at my house. And I'm talking to my other neighbors that have been there longer. They've been complaining since the 80s. Only to find out that, yes, I was right. The wastewater division is going to rip out the sewer line in front of my house and increase the size. Because 4 8-inch lines don't go into 1 8-inch line. They had overflowed one system. And it's a negligent engineering process. One of those had a 10-inch overflow into an 8. So not only did I have 4 8-inch lines going into one, but a 10-inch line overfilling into those. And only when I pointed out these problems on their own sewer map, they go, oh my God, you're right. And then they're telling the insurance company they're not negligent when they just admitted there's broken pipes, blocked pipes, and pipes that were not done correctly. The sewer system was not engineered correctly. And people have been complaining for years. First time's on me, you're not negligent. Second time, well, maybe you didn't get the work done yet because it has to go through committee and then get done. Fifth and sixth time, guess what? Now you're negligent. People came out and said, look, there's a problem and nothing got done. Twice in past, this project was tabled for lack of funds. And since then, my house is flooded 2 more times. Twice this year alone. So my other question is, we have this new claims process, or it's not new, it's going to be new to me because no one bothered to tell everybody. And the other problem is, all the people that filed claims should have been notified of the meetings, and they weren't. Nobody was said, hey, we've been begging the city. I sent an email to Lisa Modric. She was kind enough to forward it along. No one even bothered to tell me about today's meeting. I had to hear about it from another person. Nobody from the seating said, hey, we know you've been calling about this. We know you have problems. We know you haven't been paid. No one bothered to instruct any of the homeowners, hey, please come out and listen. But this year alone, my house flooded twice, 2 days apart. I got done pumping it out, started drying it, and guess what? Got nailed again 2 days, almost 3 days later. So do I get 2 separate cleanups? Because I filed 2 claims. And not only that, I mean, I have it pretty bad. I have over $13,000 in structural damage, meaning the drywall, the carpet, all the materials that has to get replaced. About another $9,000 to $10,000 in pumping and cleaning cost. And then on top of it, I lost $25,000 in my personal property. What do you say to a guy like that? They're out $50K and you want to offer me 5 cents on the dollar. And sadly to say, I'm not the worst. Just down the road from me, my neighbors had their house flooded so deep it started an electrical fire. Their house is now condemned and they can't live in it. They own that house free and clear and now have to pay rent to live somewhere else. Their homeowner's insurance didn't cover water backup. And due to the fire being from water backup, it's not covered either because the cause was water backup. So their house has to be gutted to the stud because all the wiring has to get done by code. And everything in their basement's obviously ruined. And now that the power's been off all summer, I imagine there's water in their basement still. What do you do for people like us? Especially when it looks like, whether it is or not, that a department is going out of its way to not inform the citizens on how to do these procedures properly. They said, oh no, everybody got notice. Everybody got a claim form handed. Almost everybody at the hearing did. No, we didn't. Even people that had requested claim forms weren't getting them. We had to come to the city and chase it down department to department until somebody actually got us to the right spot. So there needs to be a large overhaul of this process, not just the paying of out people. There's people today I'm still telling about the claims process because they were never even told by the city they can file a claim. And they want to say there's only 40 or 50. I've met another 20 people that are waiting to see how this comes, and they're going to drop their paperwork too. It's that bad. There's houses all the way up and down Anamosa and all the side streets, both East and West Anamosa, Robbinsdale, West Main Street. And then you got public news about businesses being flooded downtown. I think it's time we start investing in the infrastructure. It needs to be fixed. And then everybody else in the meantime, if I backed up a sewer truck to City Hall with a leaky valve and let it leak, am I going to tell you, don't worry, I'm only paying $3 a foot? Because I'm sure you'll go after my insurance company. It just needs to be straightened out and fixed. Because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if I go get city pool insurance and say, hey, I'm only qualified to pay you $3 a foot, and I fill the lower level with sewer water, how mad would you guys be? You'd send me to jail in the meantime. But when you guys do it to me, it's, sorry, do it on your own, have a nice day. And that needs to get fixed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bellotta. I don't have any more speaker request forms, so I will close the public comment period, and we will go on to item 17. Item 17, denial of resolution 2019-058, a request by Fisk Land Surveying and Consulting Engineers Incorporated for David Ritter to consider an application for a vacation of right-of-way for that portion of Wood Avenue, right-of-way adjoining blocks 11 and 12 of Airport Edition, located at the northwest corner of Section 25, T2N, R7E, BHM, Rapid City, Pennington County, South Dakota, more generally described as being located within Wood Avenue, lying south of Knollwood Drive. Any speakers on this item? Staff?
We do have Fletcher here to answer any questions or present any information that is necessary.
If I don't have any speakers, how about a motion? Oh, thank you, Councilwoman Modrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I bring Fletcher up to
Absolutely.
explain the denial of Planning Commission?
Any specific question?
Hi. Yeah, if you could, for public purposes, explain the Planning Commission's decision on the denial of this resolution so that we have that on record.
Okay, well, the request was to vacate a portion of Wood Avenue right-of-way located south of Knollwood, north of Wright Street. transportation plan identifies that the street connection is needed in the future, so staff's recommendation was to deny the request, and Planning Commission denied it.
Very good, and it's before us today. It wasn't, the denial wasn't appealed, we just have to approve their recommendation.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Modrick. If we can get a motion on this? So the motion is to deny this? Thank you. I just wanted that clarified. So we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Item 18, resolution number 2019-080, amending the policy of the City of Rapid City to defray the cost of cleaning of property damaged by sewer backups. Councilwoman Modrick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you would allow me, I'd like to maybe, let's see, where did Joel go?
He left. He didn't want to talk about it. No, I'm sure he'll be back.
Okay, well, he was my answerer. We've got some citizens' questions here that I think deserve to be answered. They are thought out. I appreciate that the citizens have come forward. They've worked very hard on this since the rain events, since the sewer events for this year, as well as we know we've been having events for quite some time now. And I feel that with this being in a hearing format, it would be good for Joel to maybe answer a few of the questions, so if I could have that liberty.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Hi, Joel. I know you've worked hard on this, and I appreciate it because we've needed something updated in our resolution, and I'm just truly appreciative of you and the city working on this and bringing something forward to us. But there are a couple of questions maybe we should satisfy if we could. The first one was, one of the questions, it was the very first question was, how does the insurance affect the city reimbursement? Do you have that clarity for us on how that does affect the citizens on their claims?
Yes. If you have insurance and you got reimbursed through insurance, then it's not going to reimburse you the $4 per square foot, but we'll pay your deductible. So you wouldn't be out of pocket on your deductible. If you don't have insurance, then you get the $4 a square foot. The way we changed it, one of the things that clearly through the meetings and discussions with elected officials, and the feeling seemed to be that it was unfair that if you cleaned your property yourself that you received no reimbursement. Mm-hmm. And so now it's just going to be a $4 flat per square foot. So even if you did the work yourself, I mean, at the end of the day, we know if this happened to you, I mean, this isn't going to be a windfall to you. I mean, you're probably going to have more property damage, and just the time and effort you put into cleaning it up is probably worth more to you than the $4 a square foot you're going to get. And it did seem unfair that, you know, if you're told that the professional cleaning companies are 3 weeks out to show up at your house, so you clean it up yourself, now you get no reimbursement and put people in a tough position. So to simplify the process, we just said it's $4 a square foot. Not asking for invoices, that's just what you're going to get. And so call the city, we'd come out, we'd confirm there was a backup that came from the city sewer and measure the affected area and then pay you based on that.
And when you come out, I hope that we would have a policy or a guideline on that, because one of the other complaints by the citizens also in the original meeting was that claim forms weren't given or timely. And maybe it's been happening for years, and I think now we can do the great thing of customer service and the right thing. I really believe that we should have those claim forms in hand if both the citizen is going from employee to employee to try to find how they claim, and now the employees are tied up, employee to employee. We're costing everybody time and money, and it would be so simple if somebody is there to just hand the form. So I hope we would consider that as a policy. It's time saving and it's also customer service for our citizens. and then they can proceed forward. It doesn't hurt anybody to claim on anything. It's going to go through process anyway. So it doesn't hurt to give anybody a piece of paper that it gives them a guideline for claim. The insurance max $5,000. So you've considered all of these factors. I'm sure you've researched it as well to come up with your recommendation. And I saw a note where you said it actually has a lesser value of square footage, but you felt $4 a square foot was a value for our community to use. I think you said something maybe that was $3.50.
Well,
but
I think
recommending $4.
I think when Public Works looked at it, I mean, a purely inflationary increase since 2011 would have been about $3.48. Public Works actually made the recommendation for the $4 a square foot.
And do we have that built in as part of the plan or guideline that we'll consider inflation as each year passes?
No, that isn't part of the resolution, but I think, again, that was part of the thought process with the $4 a square foot, is that would theoretically build in inflation for a few more years, and then, yeah, we'll probably have to address it again. But certainly if the council wanted to, you could build in an inflationary increase if you wanted to into the policy.
I felt like with the type of events that we have, both rain and sewer, recommendation also was to have a committee or create a special fund and a committee review. I think that's an excellent idea because I think we need all the help that we can, and we need to have citizens at the table. This is a community, and although it may look like a small percentage that is the sufferers of any given event, it's community-wide, and I just think that that is an excellent opportunity for us as well. There was also a question about special fund. Does the city have risk insurance that this $4 a square foot is going to come from, or is it going to go into a special fund? Are we going to use our sewer fund? Where's this going to come from, Joel?
Well, I thought that the payments were made out of the sewer fund. I found out later after the memo was drafted, it's actually coming out of the liability fund.
Okay.
But it's not coming out of insurance. If we're negligent and it's clear we're negligent and the insurance would then pay it, although, again, it would come out of the liability fund up to the first $75,000. So we're paying the first $75,000. So the majority of these claims we'd probably end up paying out of the liability fund. However, if you're paying, whether we're, essentially you would be saying, if you adopted a policy that said, if your sewer backs up, we're not going to make you show us why it backed up, just the fact that it backed up into your home. Now, I will say most of these, like if you look at the Bismarck, which is the most generous policy, I mean, if your sewer line, if your service line between the main and your home failed, okay, they're not going to pay you for that. But if you can demonstrate it came out of the city sewer, or it was a city sewer failure that caused your backup, then we're just going to pay you. The insurance isn't going to pay that. So that's what I'm talking about. You would need to then create a special fund to pay that, because now you're taking on an additional liability that right now is not budgeted, and we have no revenue to cover that cost. So as you're all aware, you've just approved the budget. There isn't a lot of extra money laying around to now fund this with. So you would need to find an additional revenue source. Now, Mr. Wolk can quibble with, and I mean, ultimately it's up to you maybe to decide what you think these claims are going to be worth. I admit I did spitball it. Part of the problem is we don't have receipts from everybody. Mr. Wolk's been very conscientious about getting us all his information. So we have detailed information on his claim. We don't necessarily have detailed information on everybody's claim. As Mr. Bialotta said, which I think is true, there are other people that haven't submitted a lot yet that are waiting to see what happens. So to get accurate information about what the value of all the claims this year is not realistic right now. So we do have to kind of spitball it. But you know, Mr. Wolk said his claim was, I believe, $11,000 at this point. Mr. Bialotta said close to $50,000, has neighbors that's worth. We may have some that are less than $10,000, but then we're going to have some that are over. So I tried to do an estimate, and if you figure 40 to 50 claims, I mean, I don't think several $100,000 is out of the ballpark. You have a good year, you know, here's where it gets complicated. You start thinking about insurance. How does an insurance company work? They collect more and they have a reserve in place. So if you have a bad year, they have enough money in reserve to pay those claims. But if you have a couple bad years in a row and the reserve starts to drop, then they have to raise your rates to get the reserve back up. So how much money do you need to raise to not only pay out the claims for this year and upcoming years, but build a reserve so when you have a bad year, you have the money in the bank to pay for it, and then continually monitor that. And we haven't done that. If you look around at other communities in the region, only one community does that we can find.
Which community?
Was Bismarck.
Bismarck.
And they have, just to put it, although, again, we would need a more detailed analysis of how many claims we have, but how many claims do they have per year, and how many accounts do they have? Because I think they were charging 50 cents per residential account and $1 per commercial account. So every account, every month, pays that surcharge.
So that sounds like a good plan, because as one of the documents that was held up, that was also at the special meeting that was held, it showed that there is annual breaks in claims, and perhaps all of this data from this point forward, because we have some pretty substantial information now this year, can move forward. I wouldn't want to see these claims just get paid and go into a drawer. I want to see something done that creates a plan for our future like Bismarck did. I think that's smart. And if we need to funding source this, if we've already got a sewer account, then maybe that's where we need to go. But it's too important. We've got not just this year as the wets. We could have another wets next year. We could have another one the year after. Only time will tell. But I appreciate your answers. I know that we've got another councilwoman in the queue, and I'll be listening as well. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Alderwoman Armstrong, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple different questions for some different people, if I may.
You may.
Direct a question to Mr. Tech.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be some confusion or misinformation about the process of these claims. I hate to put you on the spot right now, but could you just state for the record, if to the best of your ability, what the process is? And then I'll follow that up with another question.
From the wastewater utility maintenance side of the equation, if you will, typically we respond to calls of backups. Our crews show up, evaluate, yes, it was a backup, no, it was not. At that time, they are supposed to give paperwork to the individual. With the events of May, we were overwhelmed. We had people all over town. We ran out of paperwork. It's no excuse, shouldn't happen. We're going to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future. So unless we get a call from somebody and enter their home, that's the only way we have to give them the paperwork. Certainly they can call water reclamation, receive that paperwork if they didn't have physical contact with our city staff. One other improvement that we're looking at doing is an electronic logging of that. Our utility maintenance supervisor is looking at a software package to tack onto our work order system that'll identify those and track those better. So we have a little better handle on where the incidents occur and whether or not the paperwork was provided, and just better overall tracking. So I hope that helps. Hope that answers your question.
Okay. I'm a big proponent for communication. I don't know if it's something that the city is able to do, but can we put out maybe some public service announcements or something on our website? It sounds like you're upgrading as we're talking about this, but even having an open house, just so we have some uniformity once everything gets put in place, so our constituents know. I mean, obviously we would like just for it not to happen, but if and when it does, we would have something in place, and then we can put it out to our constituents that this is the process that you need to do. That's just an idea I'm just going to throw out.
We will do our very best to, via electronic communication, a better website link, if you will, have that information available to our citizens. As far as an open house is concerned, I would imagine, you know, we personally invited all the people that reported issues to us to this meeting that we had back in late July. We'd be more than happy to send additional information to them. We don't, if someone doesn't call us, we don't know who's having problems. So certainly electronic communication is probably the key there, that they know that there's a resource available. I don't know that an open house would be of benefit, but we can certainly discuss that, and if that seems like it may be an appropriate thing, we can certainly do that.
Yes, we do tend to kind of go to the electronic communication, but I know for a fact there are a lot of people that are not online, especially some older people, some people that maybe are just tuned out, but they might need this information. So that was just a suggestion. I also, if I could continue to talk to you, Mr. Tech, could you address the issues of the blockages? That's a pretty broad statement.
There were 3 distinct events that occurred this summer, two in late May and 1 in early July. Our system was overwhelmed with stormwater. The extreme precipitation that we've had this year were the cause of those events. I think there was an isolated part of town up in the, I want to say the Copper Ridge area. There were some debris that we found in not only the line but also in people's basements. Looked like some silt. So I don't know if that was construction related. We don't know where it came from, but it could have been, since there's new development going on in that area, there may have been an open pipe that we weren't aware of that let water into the system. Certainly that was a newer part of town. The backup should not have occurred there, so we believe that it probably was a construction-related issue. So to my knowledge, there weren't any blockages that caused backups in our May events and in our July event.
Okay. Thank you. And then one more question, and then I'll leave you alone for a little bit. Mr. Bialotta had mentioned that we had an increased amount of waste and sewer water ruptures in our city. Is that something that is just an isolated event, or is that something that happens over other municipalities? Is this a rare thing?
All water systems have leaks. All wastewater systems have areas that you get infiltration and inflow. That's just the nature of systems
Here or otherwise?
Worldwide.
Okay.
So no, it's not unique to Rapid City. You know, we've been reviewed by the EPA. They believe our system is operated very well. Received high marks from the EPA the last time they were here in regards to how many sanitary sewer overflows that they're called. So Rapid City is not in a crisis, in my opinion. We're doing well. Certainly the people that have had backups in their basements, that's an awful thing to experience. I think the expectation that our system has to be perfect and that no backup can ever occur, that's an unobtainable goal, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, a few more questions if I can.
Oh, absolutely.
I'd like to divert to Mr. Lundin, our city attorney. In these circumstances, was the city liable?
Well, I mean, I can have an opinion on that. Ultimately, it's probably going to be up to a judge and jury.
How do we determine that?
Well, you know, this is the difficulty, I think, for people in that a lot of times the specific cause of these are difficult to pinpoint. Mr. Tech has given an opinion that the system was overwhelmed. Well, you can go round and round about, well, you have too much infiltration. Well, there's infiltration in all systems. The fact the pipes are cracked or there's openings or whatever, that's true of every system. The reality is all systems are engineered to a certain tolerance, and if that is exceeded, they're going to fail. And negligent design is tricky. And an example is standards change over time. So if we were held to the current standard for how we designed something 30 years ago, we would be in a lot of trouble. So the law protects cities on design issues. They also protect you as a council, as stewards of the taxpayer money, to decide when, and how you're going to fix the infrastructure. So because you've chosen to prioritize other projects over a specific, like Mr. Bialotta says, well, my project's been moved twice, so that demonstrates negligence. Well, no, there's a lot of cases where the courts have looked at it and said, the city council chose to spend the money another way, and if they hadn't spent the money there, then those people would be suing because their problem wasn't fixed. So they try not to get into that kind of argument where they're trying to decide whether you've properly prioritized how the money was spent to maintain the city infrastructure. So it gets complicated, but as a person, you're going, look, I know I didn't do anything wrong, and your system flooded, although it's all of our system. Everybody that's hooked up to it owns that system, and we all pay to maintain it. It's an enterprise fund. Taxpayer money is not spent to maintain that system for the most part. It is paid for through your fees and charges. So I know that's hard to understand. Can plaintiffs go find a case that demonstrates, well, here's an example where a city was forced to pay for a flooding? Sure. I mean, the plaintiffs in these cases are very sympathetic. And as homeowners, those of us that own a home can easily probably put ourselves in those shoes and be sympathetic to what happened and say, hey, if this happened to me, I would probably not be very happy about it. But again, looking at the law on it, the law protects the city. I would use Mr. Wolk as an example. Mr. Wolk's initial claim was based on the fact that the city water truck jetted the line, and that's what caused the backup in his area. Now, factually, we have a disagreement about that because there was an investigation. They talked to the crew. The crew said, no, it was running at over capacity at the time we went in there. We did not jet that line. So there's a factual question. But to change it a little bit, let's say the crew said, yes, we jetted the line. That is an incident where potentially, yes, then I would say we do have some negligence because there was a city action that intervened and potentially caused that backup. So we would be negligent potentially in that case. When you don't really have an answer, or the answer is the system was just overwhelmed with stormwater, no, I do not believe we're negligent in that situation.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing is this is not it's not a very black and white situation. There's a whole lot of gray area. And, I mean, even just looking in the audience in the comparative issues, what happened. Okay, thank you. I'm yielding.
Thank you. Alderman Stroman, you have the floor. Absolutely.
So Joel, we've
in our world, a legal world. And are you aware that, is there a duty to the individual homeowners, or is it just a duty to the taxpayers to be responsible with the infrastructure?
if we're negligent, because, again, this is where it gets complicated as a city, when we engage in what's called a proprietary function, then we have more liability than when we're engaged in a general government function. And running a water and sewer system is actually, while most people would probably say, well, that's a governmental function, it's actually considered a proprietary function because we charge for it, and the revenue we raise from that system is used to support the system. So if we had acted negligently, we would actually owe the individual homeowner a duty of care and be responsible for that. But again, the law does protect us. Since you're a lawyer, I'll throw out a lot of cases against cities involve res ipsa loquitur. So, and that's a theory that in the absence of negligence, this wouldn't have happened. And really, when you talk to people who sewer back up, that's kind of where they're coming from. Hey, I shouldn't have to show that you were negligent. You should have to, my sewer wouldn't have backed up if you weren't negligent somehow in operating your system. And the courts have said, no, you can't use that theory of law in a situation. You have to actually demonstrate actual negligence, which frankly is difficult to do because, again, trying to pinpoint exactly why a sewer that was buried underground failed on a specific date and time is difficult. And then when you talk about, a lot of times, why does it fail? Because there was a blockage. Well, is the city responsible because somebody dumped, or everybody in the neighborhood dumped a bunch of grease down their drain and it caused a blockage in the line that then backed up? That's a perfect example of where the city isn't negligent. The city didn't pour the grease down the line, but the grease causes the blockage. Wipes, because wipes get caught into a big ball, is that the city's responsibility? No, it's not. There was a blockage that caused the backup, but it's the users of the system and what they're putting into the system that causes the backup. I think in this case, there doesn't appear that a lot of the flooding that we're talking about was caused by a blockage. It was caused by the system being overwhelmed by stormwater.
Thank you for that explanation. So one more follow-up. I appreciate the work that you did on surrounding communities and the study that you did to evaluate what policies are available in other cities. And you listed cities with no policy on sewer backup reimbursement, and that included Aberdeen, Spearfish, Billings, Gillette, Cheyenne, and Dickinson. Is that right?
I believe so.
Yeah, and then the Sioux Falls policy talks about backup relief program, which is not intended to replace private insurance or to fully compensate the homeowner's losses. And that's kind of what you're talking about here, is having this $4 a square foot reimbursement. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And then the last thing I have, you mentioned a proprietary function. Is sovereign immunity, does that, where basically you can't sue the government, does that apply in this case, or is that, if it's a proprietary function, is that off the table? I'm just wondering if they can actually make a claim in court, or if it would be tossed because of sovereign immunity.
Sovereign immunity does not apply to proprietary functions. It also does not apply to situations where we are insured.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. And I have no one else in the queue, and I don't believe we have a motion. Mr. Wolk.
Just quickly, a couple of things. I appreciate the rationalization of all this, but I guess what you're saying is those of us that were prudent enough to get insurance, we're not going to get any claim refund from the city.
I think you'll get your deductible. So,
and if you don't, and if they, so you're talking $500.
Could be, depending on what your deductible is, but
So
yeah.
what this new rule is applying is telling me, don't go buy insurance. Why the hell should I buy insurance since you're going to pay up to $5,000, or in this case, $4,800? So why in the world should I have insurance? I mean, why am I being penalized for being prudent?
Well, I think that is certainly something that
I think
maybe
it
we
needs to
should
be
discuss or
discussed.
consider.
Yes. And I have sent previous articles like Palo Alto, California, New Jersey, and a number of other places who have paid cleanup costs for, people that had property damage. And I think that, we need to take a look at it. If it's going to happen, we need to start a special assessment fund. I mean, we can seem to, I'd like to find out how many claims have actually been paid up to this date. Do you have any idea what the claims have been paid for sewer damage refunds to date since 2015?
Well, you mean under the existing policy, or?
Under the existing?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but we could go back and look and see how much we've paid. But again, what we aren't going to know is how many people didn't get professionally cleaned, so weren't reimbursed, which would now be eligible, so what that cost is going to be. And the other thing is we didn't pay property damage. So again, when we're talking about what the cost is going to be, is if we switch over to just paying a portion of not only cleanup but also property damage, the cost is going to be a lot higher.
Well, of course it's going to be, and somebody's got to take and suck it up. You're asking us to suck it up because you don't want to. So,
Mr. Wolk, I've gave you a lot of leeway here, and probably I am
Hey, I'm done.
Thank you. A few minutes, Mr. Bellotta, but I am really giving you guys a lot of leeway on this.
I'll be right on point. I just want to ask one question, cut and clear. I have insurance, but my insurance didn't cover the water cleanup. Do I then get the claim?
I would want to look at that, but potentially if it was not covered by the insurance, I mean, I think the idea would be that the claim was covered by insurance.
No, and I'll tell you why. I have over $13,000 in property damage, and that exceeded. They didn't even need a bill for the water cleanup yet. They only covered the property damage before even my personal property, before pumping. And I'll make one thing abundantly clear, that the mayor himself admitted to getting the city claim and using his insurance on a flood event while he was in city office. He admitted that at the public hearing, and I called him out on it. And I said, wait a second, you just admitted to
I think we're
taking-
getting a little bit off point here.
Sure. And the one other thing I want to say real fast, with this policy, if your basement floods 6 feet deep, you get paid the same amount as a guy that got 1 inch. That the flooding
No,
cost.
Mr. Bellotta, one of the things, we are just starting, can I have a little bit of leeway here, I hope? You know, we're just starting this resolution and this possible ordinance or whatever it may morph into being. Unfortunately, these things take a lot of time. I do agree with the fact that there should probably be some kind of a committee set up going into the future. We are kind of, at this point, I believe, looking for something to give some relief to what happened this year. Okay? Now, there has been some discussion about how far we're going to go with this, where we're going to be with this here. The problem is we've got to be very careful what we're doing this year for what happened in the past, because we already have a ordinance in place. So this is going to be some relief, basically, that's outside of the ordinance that we have now. So we've got to be very careful about what we do going forward and not setting precedent on something. And you know, it's unfortunate. In a perfect world, would I pay 100% of your damages? Absolutely. Would I pay 100% of Ted's damages? Absolutely. The problem is we don't live in a perfect world, and the problem is we don't have unlimited amounts of funds. You know, I think that going forward, when we put something together, yes, I would love to see a 25-cent or a 50-cent assessment on every bill to build up a pool to be able to take care of things like that. But we're in the infancy stage of that. You know, we're not going to get this hashed out on this committee meeting. We're not going to get it hashed out Monday night at the council. We're beginning something. We're looking for some kind of a way to alleviate some of the pain that's happened in this event. Okay? And then going forward, everything's up for discussion. Everything can be possibly changed. You know, like I said, I feel for you. I feel for you. I feel for the 50 people this happened to. Unfortunately, on this council, we've got 76,000 people we've got to think of, not just 50 households. So anyway, I've given you a lot of leeway. I know this committee doesn't really appreciate me all the time giving people a chance to speak, but one of the things that I don't believe in is giving you 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and I feel like I gave you quite a bit of leeway on this. Going forward, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more meetings. Hopefully there'll be some kind of a committee set up, and hopefully ultimately we'll come to some agreement that will satisfy the majority of the people. It's never going to satisfy 100% of the people. You know, if we can satisfy 50% plus one, we're doing real well. So anyway, I'm going to ask for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. And if we could get a motion to adjourn, I would be happy to leave. Have a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much, and thank you for a good meeting.